Hey, what's up, folks? This is Tony Burr and Aaron Dotson. You're listening to or watching, as the case may be, Christianity Now. Christianity Now is the podcast where we try to observe the world and interpret the world, the modern world, through the lens of the old paths, Christianity. We get the concept for the show from being sons of Issachar and understanding the times and how the kingdom ought to go. Well, we need to understand the times, and the church needs leadership that doesn't have its proverbial head in the proverbial sand and saying just, well, let's trust in Jesus and he'll save us. Folks, God helps those who helps themselves. And I think what has happened is we have Christians in 21st century have disengaged from the world so much. I don't think we can sit back on our behinds anymore and holler, Jesus, save us. I don't think he's going to do it. I think he's going to return one day to bring his own home. But I don't think those of us who washed our hands and said, well, I'm innocent of what's going on here in the world, I don't think we're going to make it to heaven.
Yeah, I didn't agree, Lord. So I just, stayed at home and minded my business.
Yeah.
I've heard
Even
Christians say that.
I know even the comedians. I was watching a comic, and I was very interested in what he had to say about abortion, and he front loaded it and was like, it's a woman's right and it's your right to choose and you can do this, and I would never take that away from a woman, but you got to admit you're murdering a baby. And like the crowd, just you could hear a pin drop, and he said, no, I'm serious.
Yeah.
And he said, look, it is the woman's choice, because whenever I get to St. Peter and the pearly gates, they're going to ask, well, what about all those babies that you humans killed? And I'm going to say, what? You humans? No, it was the woman's choice, which, Aaron, that took me all the way back to the eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it was this woman you gave me.
Yeah, blaming Eve, blaming God.
Do we think, well, that's what it ultimately was, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Do you think that Christians are going to be able to stand before God on the day of judgment, having seen all of this stuff that's going on in the world? Do you think they're going to be able to use the defense of Pontius Pilate? Well, I've washed my hands.
Right. Yeah, I'm through with this because I disagree, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's the way a lot of Christians are thinking. They're so overwhelmed with how wicked the world is, they've gotten out of the fight. And I'll give you my opinion, Tony. I think it's because we, editorial we, are afraid to be persecuted. We often talk about this. We're not persecuted like they were then. We're okay. But when's the last time you was in public teaching the word of God instead of in your little vacuum?
Yeah, we're not persecuted like they were in the first century. It's because you hadn't done anything lately to make the world mad.
Yeah, because we don't do things like they did to get persecuted.
Satan doesn't persecute his own.
Yep.
Satan loves the church today.
Yep.
Because it's impotent.
Yep.
It no longer has teeth.
Yep. That lukewarmness, that apologizing. I was talking to our young people recently about this here. I was saying, have you noticed how and I said, I'm not talking about me and you necessarily. I don't know if you've done it or not. I hadn't heard you. I'm talking about we today as Christians, generally. We like apologize for the truth. We have to caveat and mitigate I told them that. We have to mitigate everything we say. Jesus is the only way, but, one baptism, but we got to,
Listen, man, I was preaching a sermon in which I was talking about church discipline, and I was just reading Matthew chapter 18, 15 and following, and my sermon was interrupted with a caveat that mitigated the truth of what I was preaching. So, well, you've got to be careful. And I said, no, you don't have to be careful when you're doing what is right.
Just do it.
And what in the world, what makes you think that you can interrupt a sermon anyway? It's not your time to speak. Shut up.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I know. We have to be careful. Where did Jesus say that? Be careful about how you don't give me some speaking the truth in love verse. I know what
What?
that means.
Yeah.
I
And it's the same energy as in Matthew chapter 15. Whenever Jesus says, well, did Isaiah prophesy of you? And he says all these terrible things. And the apostles came to Jesus and said, don't you know you offended them?
yep.
I don't care that I offended them. They're wrong.
He didn't backpedal one bit. He didn't
No, and
apologize. He didn't change. He
he
punched.
doubled down.
He did. He
He
says
said, you let them alone.
every
They be
point,
blind leaders of the blind. If the
every
blind lead the blind, they'll both fall in the ditch.
God's gonna root it up.
Sakes alive.
Well, here we go on the. This seems to be a rant because it seems to be the constant daily problem in our society.
It is.
That's the thing. It's like niceness. We've got to be nice.
I heard.
Say it all the time, but that's what I'm hearing all the time. Be
Yeah.
nice. Be nice. We're so worried about pushing somebody away that's already away instead of drawing them with the power of the whole truth,
I'm with you. And again, I wrote an article that was developed from something I'd heard from Jordan Peterson. Always speak the truth regardless of what the outcome will be, and trust in the outcome of speaking the truth, because
Yep.
truth is from God. Sanctify them by thy truth. Thy word is truth. And even an old sinful farce of a high priest, Caiaphas, prophesied because he told the truth. He said, know ye not that it is expedient for one man to die that the whole nation might live?
Yep.
So speak the truth, and whatever outcome, regardless of the negative or positive in this realm of existence, it's God's will.
Yep.
So if you're at a congregation, I use these numbers because they're good and round, and I need round numbers. If you got a 500 member congregation, and you have to preach a sermon on marriage, divorce, and remarriage, or let's say you're just preaching through the book of Matthew, and you don't get to the other passages before Matthew 19, where you talk about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Let's say that you observe the Passover on them because you know Matthew 19 is coming up. So now this Sunday rolls around and your sermon's on Matthew 19. If you preach the truth from Matthew chapter 19, and it makes 450 members so mad that they're offended, and they go to the eldership and they call for your resignation or call for you to be fired, and the eldership backs you and says, he preached the truth, we're not getting rid of him. In fact, we might give him a raise. And they leave, and you're left with 50 members. Not only has God not lost anything, the church is stronger,
Yep.
even though it's only 50 members.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Absolutely it is.
Because that's God's will. Because you preached the truth, people stood by the truth, and the outcome was you ran 450 people off. Until my brethren get that through their thick skull, the church will always be impotent. It will always be impotent.
Yep.
It's never going to affect the change that people that God would want it to be, that God would want it to affect.
Right.
And if you think that the church is not supposed to affect the world, which is post that I have seen, then you're a fool. Now, that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is the salvation of the individual soul.
Yeah.
But what do you think salt and light, Matthew chapter 6, means?
Yep.
If the salt is lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It's good for nothing to be cast out and tried under the feet of men.
Yep. That's right.
A city that's set on a hill. All men are supposed to come to it. Christians are supposed to affect the world.
Absolutely.
Period.
And if we're not doing the truth and teaching the truth, it's not affecting the world the right way. It's affecting the world the wrong way.
Oh, that's a good point, Aaron.
It's hurting the world. It's making the world worse. We're standing by idly. We're a false witness for Christ, really. I mean, people know we're Christians and we wear the name of Christ in name only. And so we're hurting the cause of Christ. You
It's
know,
affecting the world in a negative way.
absolutely it is.
It reminds me of Galatians 6. Be
There's no
not
neutral.
deceived.
No neutral is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, be not deceived. God is not mocked.
Right.
For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. He that
Yep.
soweth unto the flesh shall of his flesh reap corruption. Or he that soweth unto his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. He that soweth unto the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. One of the things that you can learn from that passage is you will sow, and you cannot sow both to the Spirit and to the flesh. You will be sowing to one or the other.
Yep.
You cannot remain neutral in this spiritual war.
Yep.
You are either going to be fighting for or passively supporting against the cause of Christ.
Yep. To be neutral is to already have made a decision. You're all,
That's it.
You know, just makes me think of Romans 1:32, who knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them.
Read it again.
Yeah.
The last verse, approve of those.
Yeah. Romans
Or not, or the line before that, and then that line. That's
who knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them.
absolutely. And incidentally, Aaron, the King James says, take pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think either translation is wrong. I think the Greek word allows for both of those. So that tells me that that's a nuanced word. And so I'm going to take it from the King James vernacular. You may not take pleasure in all of this blasphemy that's going on, all of this heinous stuff that's against our children and against our babies, against women,
Yep.
against Christianity. You may not take pleasure in that actively, but the pleasure you take might be just keeping your mouth shut so you don't have to have a hard conversation with somebody.
That's right. That's exactly where I was going. I've heard you say that before. The silence that you take, trying to be neutral. And again, in my opinion, it goes back to not wanting to be persecuted.
That's it.
Have we counted the cost? This past Sunday night, I preached Philippians 2:5. I was so convicted about that section, with how we're to have the mind of Christ and how Jesus. I emphasize the whole section there is just speaking of Jesus' humility and his servitude, how he was a servant. And I concluded it at the end by saying that everything Jesus did, he poured himself out and filled himself with God, with the
Right.
Father's will. He didn't act on his desires. He did what was necessary, and he did the Father's will, and of course it benefits us. And like Jesus and him doing that and him sacrificing himself like that, he didn't seek pleasure. He didn't seek comfort. He didn't seek convenience. And that, I think, I'm telling you, as I examine my life, the more I live, the more I look at other Christians around me, we are living in a society that worships convenience and pleasure. That's where we are right now. And that's my opinion as to why society in America, let's just say North America. I know you're just a few miles up above America. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Same thing. I mean, it's our society is hurting because the church is being passive. Driving it back home to where we started with this. The church is being passive. But here's where we are. Christians are thinking that the gospel has lost its power and effect. I know this because I hear Christians speak of, well, nobody wants the gospel today. People today are so wicked. It's different today. Times are different now. We act like we live in a time period that the gospel doesn't have its effect. And I get it. You get a little discouraged sometimes when you get rejected over and over and over. I get that, but going back to you are the light of the world,
Yeah.
we would just keep being the light as we're commanded to be and the salt of the earth that we're to be. It makes a difference, even if everybody doesn't walk the aisle, even if everybody doesn't come to services and learn the Bible, even if everybody doesn't obey. See, it's not about numbers. It's about doing what God told us to do, and it will affect the change. We'll live in a better society. America was a better country overall, less murders, less crime, less overt public display of sin 50 years ago. And probably,
Yes.
I'm sure the main reason why is because the Word of God was exalted more and spoken of more and displayed more in public. It wasn't because every politician was a faithful member of the one church in 1960. No, 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 no. It wasn't because every president we ever had until 1990 was a faithful member of the one true church. No, 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 no. That's not net. It doesn't take everyone being a faithful member of the church, everyone walking the aisle, everyone being penitent in order to have a better society. But it does take members of the church being the light and being the salt and preaching the word, teaching the word daily, because
Yeah.
there's always going to be masses that won't do it. See my point? That's all I'm trying
Yeah.
to say. That will always exist, but it makes those masses more tender toward the gospel, less brash, less bold, because that's just the nature of the power of the gospel. Now, I'm bumping out against you. Come back at me with something. That's what I
Well,
truly think.
the mechanism whereby Christianity affects the world in order for the world to be more receptive to Christ is, and this is going to sound weird to people, public shame.
Yep.
Christianity is supposed to affect the culture.
Yep.
And in 1950, if a woman had a baby out of wedlock, she was shipped off somewhere until the baby came, and then she was brought back, and the baby was raised by her parents as if it were her sister. Now, I'm not 100% on board with that particular action, but the reason that stuff like that happened is because it was shameful to participate in sex outside of marriage.
Yep.
If you were going to have a divorce, you had to go before a judge and you had to articulate the grounds for your divorce. And if the judge thought you didn't have a good reason for divorce, he made you stay married.
Yep.
Because there was a sense of shame in our society.
Yep.
What has happened is because Christians have kept their mouths shut.
Yep.
There is no shame. So now we have members of the Lord's church going and getting in vitro fertilization. We have baby showers being thrown for 16 and 17-year-old girls who have babies out of wedlock, and they're the same energy and the same type of baby shower as the 19 or 20-year-old woman who's married and has a baby the way God wants her to have it.
Yep.
We just don't want to shame people.
Yep.
But no, there has to be societal pressure, and the way societal pressure has to be applied is your community and your culture has to be on the same page, and they have to agree that if you buck this system, there's going to be consequences.
Yeah.
But now we have, well, I just don't know where my children just, they grew up and I did everything I was supposed to do, but I don't have any control over them when they're adults, and they didn't remain faithful. Well, you didn't show up on Wednesday nights. Whenever you showed up on Sunday and the preacher did something you didn't like, you gossiped about him on the way home. You didn't show an actual respect for the Lord's church. Whenever the preacher said something about how we dress or how we act during worship or how we dress in society, not just how we dress coming to worship, then you scoffed at him and you overrode what the Bible teaching is.
Yep.
And you're watering down your Christianity generationally. And so it is true that you don't have any control over your children when they become of age, but you laid that foundation.
Right. Lost the opportunity when you had the strength over them. You had the influence over them.
And then what happens is you rob yourself of the only mechanism whereby you could get your children back if they did apostatize,
Yep.
which is withdrawal of fellowship. My children know that if they apostatize, if they leave the Lord's church, if they fall away, they no longer have a relationship with me or their mother. They are dead
Wow.
to me. Now, you might be thinking, well, Tony, that's crazy. How could you do that? I learned it from Jesus. What did the prodigal son's father say to him when he returned?
He was
Dead. He didn't go wallow with him in the pigsty.
right.
The problem is we've got too many Christian parents who have reared their child pigsty adjacent, and then whenever the children wander over to the pigsty to live, they waller with them and expect the church to deal with the stench when they show up 4 times a month for worship service.
Yep. I know there's inner workings in families that I don't know about, so I can't do a broad-based, judgment on things I don't know. But things don't look good on the outside when parents, when children are in sin, they're away from God, and people in the community know it. But on Facebook, the parents are still sharing pictures and going on vacations with them like everything's fine. I mean, something doesn't look right there. I mean, it looks like everything's hunky-dory.
It goes back to that Romans chapter 1 verse, and those that take pleasure in them that do them. Folks, it's hard. Who is my mother and my brother and my sisters, Aaron, according to Jesus?
Yep. Those that do the will of my Father in heaven. Yep.
Maybe we've reared 2 or 3 generations, and we haven't focused on that whole counting the cost thing.
Maybe we hold to our physical blood
Yep.
more closely than we do our spiritual blood.
Well, have you heard that expression, blood's thicker than water?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's usually interpreted as, like, if you and I are blood brothers, the blood of our kinship is thicker than, I don't know, whatever. But it actually is an expression that dates all the way back to ancient, I believe, Sumer. It's a Sumerian, anyway, it's old, guys, like 6,000 years BC.
Wow.
And the idea is, whenever you signed a covenant, like you and I went into covenant with one another, we would codify it in blood. The water of amniotic fluid the blood rather of a covenant is thicker, more binding than the water of amniotic fluid. So even though you and I came from the same womb, if I enter into a blood covenant, that blood covenant supersedes our familial bond.
Sounds like to me we need to be teaching that correctly.
We do, and it's part of counting the cost, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Who is my mothers, my brothers, and my sisters? Those that do the will of the Father. That is with whom I am in a blood covenant with.
Yep.
And it's thicker than the water of amniotic fluid. There are people whom I love who love me way more than I deserve. I stole that from a venerable gospel preacher, but it's the truth. But I have no contact or interaction with them because they are bound and determined to be heathens.
Yeah.
And I can't have my family around that.
I just glanced at Mark's account. You referenced who is my mother, my father, my brother, my sister. I just glanced at Mark's account, and it's just before Jesus says that he speaks on how there were the Pharisees that saw and heard the effects of the miracle that blasphemed against the Holy Spirit. Well, just a couple of verses just before that, it says that his own people heard about this. They went out to lay hands on him and said, he's out of his mind. He's crazy. So this is what his own family thought of Jesus. His own people thought he was crazy. I don't know. It just kind of makes me think of the whole blood's thicker than water.
Yeah.
Because then just a moment later, Jesus is saying, when this multitude's seeking to see, or the multitude's around him, and his physical family's seeking to see him, he says, who is my mother or my brothers? He looks around in a circle at those that sat around him. He says, here's my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and my mother. That's powerful. So some of his own physical family thought he was a nut job.
Yep.
And
would have stood and probably stood against him, would have stood against him.
Yeah, and some of them did. John 7, some of them did stand against, they said things against him, they kind of mocked his ministry. That's what I get out of John said. Why don't you go on up? Why don't you show yourself? Try
Yep.
to inject their will into the Father's will of Jesus' ministry. Be that as it may, that's the point. All I'm trying to make here is that he's being treated that way by his own family. It's in that context.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that he says, "My father and my mother, or my mother and my brothers, rather, are those that do the will of God." That's powerful. And we talk about blood thicker than water. I've never really looked into the meaning of that, but I've always emphasized how the church, like you said, the covenant people, the church, we are related by blood. We have Jesus's blood that binds us together. And I've made a point of that before. The blood of Jesus is more significant than our own blood. So, the bond and the closeness that comes there is a commitment that we should treat very seriously, to the extent that when people, roughshod over Christ and the covenant, when they kick it around like a tin can, they're shamed. But
Yeah.
we've lost that, though. We've lost that in society as a whole, and we've lost that even in the church. At least I think I definitely believe that generally, probably more specific than we want it to be. Probably more congregations than when we think it is or we wish that it were.
Yeah. I'm with you. Getting on to the next segment of the podcast. Not that we're changing topics, but I was searching for this. I bought a book years ago, and I can't. I've got to find it. I want to read it again. But the book is by Matt Walsh. It's called "The Church of Cowards: A Wake Up Call to Complacent Christians." And I'll give you here's the Amazon
That's interesting. He put some good stuff out. I'd like to see
dude.
that.
Listen to this. What would you surrender for God? Christians in the Middle East and much of Asia and in Africa are still being martyred for their faith. But how many American Christians are willing to lay down their smartphones, let alone their lives, for their faith? Being a Christian in America doesn't require much these days. Suburban megachurches are more like entertainment venues than places to worship God. The lives that American quote-unquote Christians lead aren't much different from those of their atheist neighbors, and their knowledge of theology isn't much better either. The Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire exposes the pitiful state of Christianity in America today, lays out the stakes for us, our families, and our eternal salvation, and invites us to a faith that's a lot less easy and comfortable, but that's more real and actually worth something. Spiritual junk food we're stuffing ourselves with is never going to satisfy. As St. Augustine said over a millennium ago, our hearts are restless until they rest in Him. Only God Himself can make our lives anything but ultimately meaningless and empty. And we will never get anywhere near Him if we refuse to take up our cross and follow Jesus. This rousing call to the real adventure of a living faith is a wake-up call to complacent Christians and a rallying cry for anyone dissatisfied with a lukewarm faith. Now, I am afraid, Aaron, that the Church of Christ, that is, the churches of Christ, who claim to be born out of the Restoration movement in the United States, have become just another denomination, and the Pharisees. We are the separated ones. We have this all figured out. We're not doing anything, and you can't talk about anything that's going on in the world around us because we're so separate and we're so much holy and we have everything right. So we're going to stand over here in our bubble and we're going to be the pseudo-Amish, and we're going to dress like the world, talk like the world, and act like the world, but we've heard, repented, believed, or heard, believed, repented, confessed, and was baptized, and every Sunday we preach, pray, sing without the mechanical instruments of music, partake of the Lord's Supper, and give of our means.
So we're good.
So we're good.
So we are justified in sitting by quietly about our communities and our nation and our leaders, even
That's
our
it.
political. I couldn't quit thinking recently, and still can't quit thinking about how John, the baptizer, meddled with Herod.
It's
He could
not lawful for you to have her.
he could have just left the guy alone. He could have just stayed out of. He could have looked at that deal and his interactions and teaching with Herod. He could have easily just thought, like many people do today. Well, let's don't do any undue attention. Don't. There's a time and a place. We don't need to. You know what I'm saying?
I know.
That's what we. Well, why go that? You can. There's a lot of other people you can read. Why did he mess with Herod? Why did he? You could preach a sermon on that. Why did he have to? Just leave him alone. There's thousands of other people in Judea.
He undoubtedly had a good reason.
He's the one dude that can kill you. Just leave him alone. Don't go down there to the gang-infested community to teach them. Don't go to the ruler that can kill you. Don't just. There's a lot of other people. We need you, John. We need you to preach. Just think, John could have preached for, who knows, 20, 30, 40. I don't know how old he was when he died. He probably wasn't very ancient when he died.
I doubt it.
Probably kind of young. I bet he was probably 30 or 40 years old.
A candle that burns twice as bright typically lasts half as long.
Yeah.
And John was among them that are born of women, there's not arisen a greater than John the Baptist. Notwithstanding, he that is least in the kingdom shall be greater than he.
Why didn't he stay out of quote unquote politics? Why didn't he stay out of that? Didn't he know that Christians, that people that follow the Messiah are not people of the world? The kingdom is not of this world. We need to stay out of politics. Did John not know that? Come on. He was the harbinger of Messiah. Did he not know? What was his problem?
I know. All right. Let's.
I'm the only one either. I mean, you look at Peter and James and John, the rest of them, they preached when they had the opportunity, when they stood before these guys, Paul, they preached the gospel, and it wasn't just death, burial, and resurrection. To Felix,
No.
To Felix preached, remember, Paul preached about righteousness, doing what was right, self-control, quit with your fornication, Felix, and judgment. There's a judgment day coming.
We need to get to the comment section. I'm going to take this. We're dummies, Aaron. We weren't even thinking.
He's 6 months older.
He was 6 months older than Jesus. We know how old he was.
In his 30s.
Ooh.
Yep.
We're not inspired, folks. We prove it to you just about every week.
That's right.
Let's run through these comments. So typically what we've been trying to do is have a segment of show for this Tuesday, and then we'll get the comments, and then we'll disengage from the comments, and we've got another section prepared because we're going to look at an article by Jack Wilkie. But the point that I want to make before we get to the comment section is the reason I brought the Matt Walsh book up and I started talking about modern-day Pharisees is because we have, I think the Church of Christ in the United States has become so elitist that whenever something like this comes out from a person who is a quote-unquote lay person who is just making observations about the world from a biblical perspective, we read it and we read it through a lens of, well, he's not talking about us. He's talking about worldly Christianity, denominational Christianity.
Yep.
That's where that Phariseeism comes in. I promise you that the denominations, they're better than the Church of Christ when it comes to acting in the world. They have it right. The Church of Christ does not.
Ooh, that stings hard, Tony.
And I don't care. I'm done.
Nations. No, it doesn't. Get off of it. Listen to the truth and learn the truth.
And I've observed this for years, and individually I have talked to thought leaders in our brotherhood who have agreed with me. When it comes to doctrine, when it comes to this book right here, the Church of Christ is correct.
Yep.
But when it comes to practice and how the church presents in the world, we leave the first century pattern.
And we look more like the Pharisees, not the early church.
Yes. The denominations look way more like the first century church.
Yep.
Way more like the first century church.
I believe with all my heart, and I don't care if people hang me and kill me for it. I believe with all my heart that is the main reason. It's not the only reason, but it's the main reason why the crowds are drawn to many of them.
And and
That's what I believe.
and before someone says, well, they're drawn to those denominations because
Instrumental.
they're like concerts and stuff like that. No, what the denominations that are seeing an uptick are the Orthodox.
Yeah.
You're talking about Eastern Orthodox. You're talking about Catholicism, but the Orthodox conservative Catholicism. You're talking about the old Baptist, the old Methodist, not the crazy rainbow LGBTQ mess. They want to get back to the somber, grave, reverential type communities.
Yep.
And that's what people are being drawn to because Satan has offered sugar so much. They want to get back on meat and potatoes and corns and green beans.
In a second to explain myself, because I said something big. I'm not talking about people that just show up at some random Baptist church USA, once or twice a year. I'm talking about the core of the people that continue to participate. If you ask, if you disagree with what I say, just start asking them at large instead of just one guy down the street. Just start asking them at large. Is the main reason you go there because the music? Or is it because the family and the organization and the culture there? Ask them just like that and see what they say.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some people, the main reason they go is because they like the music. Yeah, sure. But in my opinion, most of them, because they belong.
Yep.
They connect. And the reason they're connecting is because the substructure there of that group, they know that that's important.
Yep.
And they make it available. They make it possible. They have classes for people that are thinking about killing themselves.
Yep.
They have counseling for people that are dealing with anxiety and depression instead of just saying, well, go to a government program. We can't help you. They're actually reaching their hands out.
A lot of them have mental health professionals on staff.
Yep. And mental health is a real problem in our society. The Lord's church needs to wake up and try to help these folks. We don't all have to be pros. You can take one pro and give them a little money and let them help sometimes. I mean,
That's it.
You ain't got to become a counseling center. You can just have one pro that can be available to help teach people and to help people professionally.
Absolutely.
Anyhow, that's
all right. Well, I just want to clear that up, and that's why I brought up that book by Matt Walsh.
Yeah.
You need to read it. And Matt Walsh is not an actual New Testament Christian, but that doesn't negate the truth of what he says.
That's right. True.
And he's talking about the Church of Christ just as much as he's talking about any denomination. What's up, folks? Good morning to Terry Crooks, Jason Goldtrap. Good morning, and thank you for the reminder. Please like and share. Robert Leedy, listener to us. Thank you so much, Robert Leedy. Noticed on your timeline, Robert, there's some changes coming up in your life. We pray for you in that change, in that transition. And some want Christ light, not Christ like. And Mitch Sparks says one major issue in the church today is many members want a modern Jesus instead of a biblical Jesus. And man, that has reared its ugly head up here. People talk about, Jesus is loving and kind and this, that, and the other. And Jesus, would be careful about what he said because he wouldn't want to run people off. And I'm like, have you not read any page out of the New Testament Gospels?
Yep. Exactly.
Let's do a tally.
Yep.
And again, Aaron, you and I both go to John chapter 6. If that's the only example we had, that would be enough. He preached that sermon. It was hard for them to hear, and he run them off. Then he turned to his closest confidants and said, "You going to leave me like those other people left me?"
Yep.
And Jordan Alker, Aaron, he said, "Great point." But that was, I remember you speaking. I remember when it come across, but I can't remember the point you was making. But it was a good one. And then Barry Odell from Mammoth Spring Church of Christ coming in clutch when we was trying to figure out how old John the Baptist was. Duh.
Yeah.
He was 6 months older than Jesus.
And he wasn't.
So he died. Do what?
He wasn't very old. I was right.
That's it. He died in his 30s.
That's not very old.
I like this one. I've been thinking lately that we need a reset or a revival to go back to the beginning. Yeah, you and me both.
Yep.
Got to have something. And then, thanks, brother. I appreciate the prayers. It is our pleasure to pray for you. So, there's our comments. Thank you so much. Now, Aaron, if you got anything to say, if I want to look at this article by Jack Wilkie.
I didn't know if he read. I also saw with Jason. He said convenience and pleasure 2 generations ago was the reward for frugality and persistence. Today, it's a burden.
Where is that? Can you put it up on the screen? I don't see it.
Yeah, it's right before.
No, right there. It is there. I got it.
I just clicked show. But yeah. Yeah. It's
My
just
bad.
what we were saying, that, with the shame, we need to be ashamed of sin and accountability. Convenience and pleasure 2 generations ago was the reward for frugality and persistence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Today, it's a burden.
Yep.
True that.
Yep.
So, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I just overlooked it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Do you got anything to add before we switch gears and go to this Jack Wilkie article?
No, I want to see this article. Go ahead.
All right. So, Elon Musk and the death of Christianity. Half right, half wrong. I'm going to read a little bit here, and then we'll discuss. Last week, the world's richest man, Elon Musk, shared his take on Christianity in a sit-down with Jordan Peterson. Musk stated that he is a cultural Christian who is a big believer in the principles of Christianity, but ultimately not religious. Since that interview, countless people have taken to X, Twitter, Musk platform to try to win him over. Then the Olympic Last Supper debacle happened, and Musk revealed one of his big gripes about Christianity. Modern Christians sit by and tacitly accept blasphemy against our God. And Jack has added some pictures of tweets from Elon Musk. 3.1 million views this tweet has. Christianity has become toothless. And 89 million views this tweet has. Unless there is more bravery to stand up for what is fair and right, Christianity will perish. Now I'm going to continue to read. Responding to a tweet about how the responses would have been different had Islam been the target of the mockery, Musk said the above. Christianity has become toothless. He then went on to say the following about the matter. Unless there is more bravery to stand up for what is fair and right, Christianity will perish. While I am not a big fan of letting outsiders tell us how to run the church, I believe Musk is half right and half wrong. Now, let me tell you what I believe Wilkie is doing here. Wilkie is responsibly and sadly mitigating what the point that he's about to make, because if he doesn't, folks will pearl clutch and point at him and tell him he's just being a radical and they won't listen to his words. So he's saying he's half right and half wrong.
I think he's trying to make what he's about to say more palatable to people that don't want.
Yes. And I don't think that's necessarily a negative.
Yeah. And he's saying he's by doing that. But
yeah, I think it's sad that he has to do it. I think you ought to just be able to come out and say, look, Elon Musk is absolutely right. Now, there's a sense in which the church is never going to perish. And that's why Wilkie says he's half right and half wrong.
Yeah.
Jesus paid far too much to see his church disintegrate into nothing. All right? I'm not going to read that segment, but you get where he's going with that. But having said that, we can't allow the assurance of Jesus' church not disintegrating into nothing to lull us into inaction. Christ works through his people. And if we aren't bearing fruit, we shouldn't be surprised when pruning, even burning, comes our way. John 15:2. And that points to what Musk got right. He is right because the church would die if something doesn't change. So, as we just established, the church won't die. But the only reason the church won't die is because God will raise up the kind of men and women of valor and virtue who will turn the tide. He allowed us to continue on this path. If he allowed us to continue on this path, the church would indeed perish.
Maybe a better word would be the crippling of Christianity.
Wilkie's article, though, is about Elon Musk's words, and Elon said, the death of Christianity. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. But no, you're right. If we're going to try to change this into Yeah, I think probably the crippling of
Yeah,
Christianity.
silence is crippling it. There's no doubt
Yeah,
about that. That's on
absolutely.
my mind. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to. I'm not going to read. I almost want to read the whole thing, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. Let me read this paragraph, and then there's a mock conversation between Musk and a winsome Christian. Incidentally, let me see if I can look this word up. Winsome. I know what it means in the context. Winsome is attractive or appealing in appearance or character. So a winsome approach to Christianity is trying to make Christianity so attractive and appealing that it brings people from the world to Christ. The problem is the pleasures of sin are only for a season, but those pleasures are intense.
Yeah.
And you can't make Christianity look in this realm of existence more appealing than the world and living like the world.
No, because Christianity is a life of sacrifice and
Yes.
death to self.
And the problem that we have in the church today is the winsome mentality.
Yes.
All right. So Musk also sees ivory tower ministers who apparently have no ability to understand causes and effects since they are shielded from any consequences of their pietistic messages. He sees that they have no motivation to discuss anything practical when feel-good platitudes garner more amens and pats on the back. And in the Lord's church, you want to get a good, even if you've got a strong, biblically sound congregation, if you want a bunch of amens and pats on the back, go preach about the exclusivity of the Church of Christ. But if you want to get ostracized, go preach about how to live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world, and how to leave ungodliness and worldly lust.
Yep.
They're not going to like it.
No.
All right.
No. No. Because they're set on it. I mean, that's simple. It's not.
Yes.
Not hard to understand why.
Wilkie says, I've had enough of these interactions that I can tell you exactly how this would go. And he writes from his perspective a mock conversation with Musk and a winsome Christian, which I believe it's worth the price of the article.
Yeah, it's good.
Musk, pro-trans doctors, that's pro-transition, transgender doctors, destroyed my son's life. What can we do about this? The winsome Christians reply, just love your enemies and pray for those that curse you. Musk, but can we bring these people to justice for all the people they're harming? Winsome Christians in power don't mix. Musk, can we at least try to elect somebody who will make youth gender treatment illegal? Winsome Christian, that's spiritual adultery. Put not your faith in the princes. Musk, so you have no answer at all for saving these children. Winsome Christian, Jesus' kingdom is not of this world.
That's it.
That's it. And listen,
Yeah.
If you're a winsome Christian, I have this much respect for you.
Yeah.
That's zero.
Yeah.
And it's pitiful and pathetic, and you're pitiful and pathetic. Tell me we don't like to mention politics from the pulpit. If you preach about the sin of homosexuality, you're preaching politics in the pulpit, whether you like it or not.
Yep.
All right. Wilkie goes on to say, as we sit idly by and pat ourselves on the back for giving all the right answers, souls are being put through the meat grinder. I honestly can't blame Musk for seeing Christianity as a dead end for confronting evil.
Yep. Yep.
We have secular people who see the evil in the world and want to do something about it. Not only do they see an ally in Christianity, they see an active effort to hinder them in opposing evil. Excuse me, I read that wrong. Not only do they not see an ally, sorry, Wilkie, I removed that not and changed your whole point.
Yeah.
Not only do they not see an ally in Christianity, they see an active effort to hinder them in opposing evil, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm when I'm in the public square and I'm saying, "Hey, dummy, they're coming after your children," and they're saying the quiet part out loud, Christians get in the comment section and say, "Well, you need to quit messing with politics because the kingdom's not of this world, and this, that, and the other."
Well, at the end, they'll pay in the judgment.
That's it.
That's the whole winsome. Well, we'll let God settle the score at the end. So in the meantime, we'll stand here and let them slaughter our children and change their penis and vagina.
That's it.
I did the buzzwords, but it's like,
I know.
yeah, right. You saw Mammoth Spring. I get tired of the old. It's not the elephant or the donkey; it's the lamb.
Yeah, which implies that everybody that talks about this is usurping Jesus as Lord, but it doesn't take into consideration that as a society, if we have evil people oppressing us, somebody has to be able to wield the sword of vengeance against the evildoers on our behalf. Who is it?
Right.
Who gets to wield the sword?
Yep.
The government. That's Romans 13. The article that I released this morning about spiritual warfare, I made the point Christians are called to participate in politics. Back in 90s, I was given a book one Christmas, the Little Book of Wisdom or something like that, I can't remember. And it was a bunch of little proverbs from this guy's dad and granddad and things he'd gathered over the years. And he said, politics is way too important to be left up to politicians.
Yeah, the worldly people.
Exactly. And this dude was a worldly person. He wasn't, this wasn't a book from Christianity.
He knew enough to say that.
The heathen understand.
Exactly. They do.
That you don't need to let career politicians handle politics, because could you imagine allowing all of the C-suite people to make all the rules for the country?
Right.
They wouldn't be nefarious about it. They would just oppress the downtrodden. They would oppress the innocent. They don't have the same ethos.
Yep. Absolutely.
So Christians, and again, go to Romans 13. Well, let's just go to Romans 13. I'll read it here. Well, first off, Romans 13 doesn't technically exist. It's just a letter to the church in Rome. So let's read this.
Yep.
Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink, for in so doing thou shalt heap fires of coals on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. What do you think overcoming evil with good is? Engaging in the political process, Christians. Engaging, because you're not supposed to be vengeful. You're supposed to give place unto wrath. Vengeance is God's. So who gets it? Well, let's keep reading. Whosoever therefore, let every soul be subject to the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore that resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. Oh, so I'm supposed to be a good citizen and follow the rules. Yes. For he, the powers that be, the civil government, is the servant of God to you for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger, to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Now, the servant of God, the civil government, is a revenger what kind of sword or tool would he wield in order to execute vengeance on the evildoer?
A death tool.
The sword of vengeance.
Yep. Yep.
Folks, look at how do you think Paul survived whenever he was grabbed by that mob and they went about to kill him? He knew enough about the political system that he was able to leverage his station in the polis in order to get a hearing before Caesar.
Yep.
In fact, there's a conversation between him and the leader, the not the centurion, but the chief above the centurion. He says, "I'm a Roman citizen." And the centurion said, "I paid for my citizenry of great price." Paul said, "But I was born free."
Yep.
Which means Paul, in the hierarchical social order, stood above this man. And these people were afraid because they had handled him harshly. They had used the sword of vengeance wrongly.
Mm-hmm.
And that allowed Paul to survive and then to be able to get an audience with Caesar.
Yep.
Christians need to be engaged in this political process.
Yep. I want to go back to what you said in the beginning. It was like a eureka for me.
Got you.
There ain't no Romans 13.
Right.
There ain't no Romans 13. It's if your enemy's hungry, feed him, and don't be overcome by evil. Overcome evil with good. Here's how you do that.
Exactly.
That's the thing. It's like instead people will just like eisegete this away from it. It's just like, oh yeah, Romans 13 means you gotta do everything the government says, no matter what, unless it tells you to do something that the Bible says is wrong. That's what I've heard all my life. It's like
Romans 13 says that if the government tells you to shut the church down, you got to shut it down.
right. Yeah, Romans 13 means if the government requires all males to do this, do that, then you got to do it. No matter, it's like no. That's what I've heard that all my life. As long as the government doesn't tell you something sinful to do, and that sounds good. I think there's a lot of truth in that. But what I'm saying is that what he's trying to say here? I don't think that's what it is. He's saying don't be overcome by evil, but overcome it with good. Okay, how do you do that in this sphere? How do you do that?
If you don't think that there is a force of evil in the world wreaking havoc on the innocent, you're a fool.
Yep.
And you probably don't need to replicate your genetic material.
Yep.
Ted Knight, whenever we was talking about Romans 13, saying amen. I appreciate it. And Ted wrote a post about Christians getting involved in politics.
I hadn't seen that yet. I need to get on
I haven't seen it either.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. As we said briefly before we started the show, Aaron, the problem is people don't understand nuance. It's not a zero-sum game. If you preach politics, you don't preach politics to the exclusion of preaching Christ.
Yeah. You don't just every sermon you're addressing the sins that exist in the civil government. It's like, no. That's not what we're saying.
That's it.
The whole council.
Well, here's the thing. If I got up on Sunday morning anywhere in the United States and I preached a sermon against the sin of LGBTQ AAIP+, the sin of castrating your children, the sin of removing viable breast tissue from a 12-year-old girl, the sin of masquerading as a man when you're a woman or masquerading as a woman when you're a man, the sin of murdering a baby in the womb.
Yep.
Do you understand that there would be people in those crowds that would say, well, why are you preaching against the Democratic Party?
Yeah. Why are you getting into politics?
And my response would be, if all I did was preach these things and you associated that with the Democratic Party, that should tell you something about how you should vote.
Yep. Amen.
That's it. Our COVID showed us how eager our leaders were to allow the government to shut the church down.
There is, and I just one more. There is nothing in the New Testament that prohibits a Christian from being directly involved in the polis, in civil
That's
government.
it.
Nothing. I'm wearied with this passivism that exists in the church.
Yeah.
The reason I'm wearied with it is because I believe it's only helped us get us where we are now.
Yeah.
That's why I'm weary with it. I don't have a personal vendetta against somebody. It's just that's just perpetuating the idea that goes against all the scriptures we've already shown to teach these truths. That we're the light of the world. How can we be the light of the world if we're hiding in the corner?
That's it.
How? How are we permeating the earth, the inhabitants of the earth, like salt, if we can't? We can only do it in our buildings. We can only we can only do it here and in private conversation. You can't do it on the public platform. And that's a lot of what the polis is. It's like a public platform. Yeah, it's civil government, but it's like it's more public. And again, going back to something I've already said, I'm afraid. I truly believe the reason why we're not involved in it is because it brings persecution. It's hard. I've heard of and known of members of the church who were in the civil government. Some of them got out of it.
Yeah.
Some of them stayed with it. It was really hard. I can understand that. I can see that. I see that. That's a lot of persecution that comes with it. And I'm not saying every member of the church needs to join up and be the mayor and all that. I'm not saying that, but you can still be directly involved instead of silent.
Yeah.
Show up at the local meetings in your town hall and teach the gospel and teach the truth.
Or just make your voice heard in the digital public square.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
You don't have to put out a meme or a post that extols in the United States the Democrats or the Republicans, but I promise you, if you put out a post, an article from a brother, if you share this post by Jack Wilkie, or post, if you share this article by Jack Wilkie, if you share this article from us, I think I shared it in the.
There was an article you shared earlier.
Yeah, the reality of spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
That's you like it or not, that's participating in politics.
Yep.
Because what we are at war with is the evils of the world.
Yep.
And the weapons of our warfare are spiritual. They're metaphysical. Christians, I don't think, are supposed to. Probably not. I've struggled with this for years. I don't know. I'm not pronouncing judgment on anybody that's gone on before me, and I'm not pronouncing judgment on anybody that has fought in a revolutionary war. But I'm not sure that that's Christians what they should do.
Yeah.
I go both ways on it.
I know what you mean.
Okay, so that doesn't mean that I think America is bad. That doesn't mean that I think the founders of the United States of America were in sin. I've studied enough of that I think that what was going on was the right thing to do.
Most all people would admit that at some point people have to do something.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a line. Even your pacifist people, I mean, at a point, most of your maybe not all, because some of them are really nutty, but at some point, even probably most pacifists would say we've got to. These people are killing our children, they're raping our women.
Well,
that we've got to stop it somewhere.
Even hardcore pacifists will dial 911 and.
Yep.
And
let somebody else do that.
By proxy on their behalf commit violence.
Yep. Yep.
So again, I'm not sure where I fall on this.
I know. I don't know. There's some sticky questions. I'm thankful God's the judge and not me.
Well, that and I think about World War II with what Hitler was doing, and I think it was a very righteous thing for people to take up arms and shut the Germans down.
Yep, I do too. Absolutely.
Now, if you want to poke holes in my theology, more power to you. I'm not saying there won't be holes in my position.
Yeah, and what all was going on underneath or under the surface of that caused it, or people that knew about it and should
Yeah.
have done something. What I ain't talking about. I'm just bottom line. Does the Nazi regime need to be stopped? Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
It surely does.
Now, all of that to bring back to the point, we're in spiritual warfare, and the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, they're spiritual, they're metaphysical.
Yep.
And so one of the things we do is we can participate in the civil government in order to effect positive change that allows Christendom to flourish. And as Ted Knight said, Satan loves our silence.
Yeah.
And hello, Chris Olive. Good to see you.
I'm going to go out on a limb to give your honest reasons why you as a Christian believe that one party, or let's go more specific, one individual candidate is better for us living a quiet and peaceful life in all tranquility and the word of God having free course, 2 Thessalonians 3:1. That's not me worshiping a political person. That's not me agreeing with everything that person ever did, ever thought, ever said, ever will do. And I'm sick of that. I'm sick of that.
Yeah.
I'm sick of if I say, here are my reasons why I believe this candidate is the better candidate from a biblical perspective. I'm sick of the naysayers that are come back with, oh, well, that's giving them it's like some kind of junior high popularity contest or something. Like,
Yeah.
folks, let's grow up. Let's get over that. Like, I'm tired of. It bothers me. Yeah, I get it. There are things about probably every politician that make a Christian cringe. Like, I don't agree with that.
J.D. Vance.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. But it's like, don't come attack me or other brethren who are just preaching the truth and giving the reasons why this platform, or even this candidate who says they're going to do this platform, is better for what I just mentioned, 1 Timothy 2, 2 Thessalonians 3, etc., Constitution, which our whole country is based on, whether you like it or not, it is. Don't call me a Trumpian or a Trump lover or a Trump worshiper, or just gag me a maggot. Anyhow, I'm tired.
Well, I said the other day, I'm tired of the framing. I do not like the framing when it comes to Christians voting. Well, you just pick the lesser of two evils. No, I'm not picking any evil. I'm not picking any evil. I'm voting for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance because they are much better qualified to do the job, and the outcome of them doing, if they do what they tell me they're going to do, the outcome will be a greased funnel towards Christian ethics.
Yep.
I'm not voting for them as a person.
Yeah, if they've never sinned before, or if they're on their fourth marriage. I keep hearing Christians talk about how Trump's on his fourth marriage and he's had education, all these different. That's not why I would vote for him or anybody.
Quite frankly, who cares?
Exactly.
When you go to the doctor, do you give the doctor a doctrinal questionnaire?
No, but you go to that doctor trusting that he'll do what he's trained, what his professional knowledge and experience.
I've heard people all the time. Well, I mean, it's you can't be a nutritionist if you're fat. Why not? Can you not know all of the things that the human body needs and not follow that yourself? Now, I'm not saying that a Christian, I'm not saying that you can be a gospel preacher if you're in sin. That's a different story. That's covered in Scripture.
Right.
But I've never gone to a doctor and asked that doctor what he believes about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. I've never gone to that doctor and asked him about his personal life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just need you to do the job.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, I don't care if he's on 3 or 4 divorces. That doesn't tell me anything about how he's going to run the nation.
That's right. As far as a political candidate to be the president, I don't care. The only reason I would care is because I'm a Christian, and I hope he and every single one of them people up there was not in sin and would obey the gospel. That's the
Yeah.
only reason I care about that. We're talking about the platform and politics is what we're talking about.
I'm going to go one further. If a member of the Lord's church were running for president of the United States, I might not vote for him.
Yep. Depends.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Now, if a member of the Lord's church had the same political ability as Donald Trump, but didn't have all of the secular baggage, I'd vote for them.
Sure.
But, well, who was that black doctor?
Ben Carson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ben Carson was a putz. He was a dud of a candidate.
Yeah.
He would probably be a much better, quote unquote, president or politician. But the problem is he was like a wet blanket. No personality, no charisma. And I don't think he would have been able to win a campaign.
Unfortunately, given the good things you said about him, unfortunately, he didn't have what it took and what it takes to be the, I know Christians opine that, well, there's only two options and that kind of thing. And it's like, you got to work within the system as it is. That's my opinion. Especially if you're going to vote. If you're going to vote, you got to make your best decision based on what it is.
Yeah.
I could wish all day long it was two faithful members of the church and whatever and da. It is what it is. And like Ben Carson, he's got some good qualities, but he can't win the Republican Party over Trump. He could.
Well, that I'm not even sure. He was such a wet blanket that I'm not even sure about his other policies. He may be a Republican, but he may be farther left than some of these guys that are running, and he may not treat the church well.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either. Yeah.
I don't know, but I do know what Trump stands for, and love him or hate him, he loves the United States of America, and he considers the United States of America to be a Christian nation based on Judeo-Christian principles, and he's going to try to conserve that.
Yep.
Anyway, Aaron, I think I'm done.
Yep. Me too. Because here's the bottom line. This is about us being Christians in the world. Yeah, we've talked about Democrat and Republican and Trump and Ben Carson, but to talk about these people does not make me a follower of any of them.
That's it.
I'm tired. That's a straw man argument. I'm a servant of Jesus Christ, and you go back to like Jesus himself, John the Baptizer, and the whole lot of the godly men that preached the truth. Elijah preaching against Ahab, etc. They got directly involved in politics. I mean, he one-on-one with the king.
Yep.
And when the king was doing all this false worship and leading the people in the wrong way, and he was called names, Elijah was, the troubler, his response was, no, the truth is you're the troubler. You're the, a lot of people would see that as just arguing and bickering. He just bickered back. Preachers don't need to bicker back and forth with people. That's the way a lot of people see preachers today, is like some kind of pushover sis that's just supposed to, yeah, you guys, do whatever you want to do, as long as you love Jesus. It's like, no, I see Elijah as a man that said, no, you're the problem. You think I'm the problem? You're the problem. And I'm going to show you so with God.
Do you remember what Jesus said about John the Baptist? What'd you come out to see?
Yeah, what did you go out to see?
Did you go out to see a reed shaken by the wind?
No.
Did you think you'd go out to see a panty waist?
Yep.
Let me tell you something about John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yes.
Among them that are born of women, there hath not arisen a greater prophet than John the Baptist.
I know. So to the person that says, well, back to the comment, grabbing in like what Mitch said in his comment, people, this modern Jesus is making God in our own image. The modern Jesus is making Jesus in my own image. and
That's it.
accepting what the text says about him. And the text says that he was a strong and bold man. He was a man full of compassion and tender mercies, and he was also a man of strong, the most strong morals and godliness. I mean, he said, like what you just said about John. And there's not been one risen greater than him. And what did you go to see? Did you go to see a sis? Did you go to see some sissy pushover? Is that what you think the prophets, no.
And he goes on to say, to what should I liken to this generation? You're like little children in the marketplace saying, we lamented and you didn't cry. We piped and you didn't dance. Listen, John the Baptist came neither eating or drinking, and y'all, and not being a part of society, y'all called him demented.
Right.
The Son of Man comes eating and drinking, y'all call him a glutton and a wine bibber.
Yep.
Basically, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yep.
So I'm just going to do what God says, and the world. Do I have to finish that?
Which proves the world of Jesus' day was not pleased with God and God's things, namely his son
That's it.
and his messengers. They were not, and the same thing is true today. The majority of people, but I'm going to go back full circle to what I've already said, because I keep hearing it. I have thought it before, I felt it before, I've repented of it, and I hear brethren still say it. Don't get down and discouraged and think that nobody wants the gospel, and we just live in this unique time where basically it's not even worth fighting the fight, because today we're fighting such an uphill battle, there's no victory to be had. Don't give up.
Yeah.
Don't give in. Don't cop out. Just preach the word and live by the word. You will see changes. You will see it. It will happen, and it will accomplish what God pleases when we let it have its way.
And make them kill you to shut you up.
Amen.
You don't have to be a shark. Be a puffer fish.
Yeah.
I think about the Fahaka puffer that lives in the Nile River alongside the Nile crocodiles. Those things are amazing. I used to have one as a pet in a 75-gallon aquarium. And that dude had a lot of personality. I'd feed him snails and shrimp, frozen shrimp, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he'd get excited to see me. And if I didn't feed him, sometimes he'd spit water at me.
Cool.
I'd be like, hey, man. Anyway, but they're tough.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. I mean, if you're in a river full of Nile crocodiles, you don't have to be a crocodile, but be a puffer fish.
Right.
Just swell up and don't let them get you.
Exactly.
And make them kill you to shut you up.
Don't buy into the give up attitude that the church is irrelevant, and the gospel is irrelevant. It's not effective. Nobody wants it. That's exactly where Satan wants us, and I believe in all my heart that's where Satan has most of the Church of Christ today. If we really believe that message, we would be boldly proclaiming it.
That's
We'd
it.
be standing there preaching with no mitigation, not worried about what people are going to think or say.
Well, and I brought up the thumbnail because we've talked a whole lot about spiritual warfare, but not a whole lot about gaslighting in the Olympic Games. So just quickly as we're closing up, I hate to say the inspiration, but the reason you're getting this conversation from us today is because of all of the gaslighting that I've seen about these Olympic Games. Aaron, have you not seen where it has come out now that the person that was responsible for this, the optics said and confirmed that, yes, this was supposed to be a representation of the Last Supper.
Yeah, I know. And I saw comments by people online, dogging out professing Christians that we're all a bunch of stupid idiots, that it had nothing to do with the Last Supper in Christianity. It was only about Dionysus. I immediately, when I saw that, Googled Dionysus feast. And the first picture that came up looked more like, it didn't look more like the Last Supper picture that we know Da Vinci that he did, that's associated with Christianity. That their act at the beginning of the opening ceremony resembled that.
And it was on purpose.
More than the Dionysus deal, the pictures that I saw, the Dionysus feast that some of them are claiming, is these
Yeah.
people everywhere, all over the table. They had it where people were behind the table, like in what's his name, Leonardo da Vinci. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyhow, yeah. So now even the person that put it together and the mainstream media, they supposedly apologize. They're now saying that, oh yeah, it did. It was intended to reflect the Last Supper.
Now, whenever this happened, like you said, the gaslighting from Christians, there were Christians that took to the social, the digital public square and said, hey, this ain't good. If this would have happened to Islam, well, this would have never happened to Islam. Well, you Christians need to know your place. You Christians are just, you're seeing boogeyman everywhere.
Yeah.
That's the gaslighting.
Yeah.
That's the gas. No.
You're just trying to claim people's persecuting you all the time, and they're not.
What's
Nobody's
the-
persecuting y'all.
What's the verse in Isaiah? Woe to those who call evil good and good evil.
Yep, Isaiah 5:20. Yep.
The converse then is true by implication. Blessed are those who call evil evil and good good.
Yep.
And let me tell you something.
Yep.
Regardless of the intention, we know as a fact that is true that was a take on Da Vinci's The Last Supper. And I don't believe that Da Vinci's painting is sacrosanct,
Yeah, like
but
it's
The Last Supper is.
right. Yeah.
And they were perverting it, and they know it.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
So we're allowed to call it evil because it is.
Not because I want to see anyone persecuted, but because I want to expose the double standard. I would like to see the Paris Olympics do a whole thing. They study what happened in Medina or anywhere over there with that black cube over there for that religion, you know?
Yep.
And I'd like to see them do that and make fun of that. I'd like to see them have all the LGBT, because we all know what Islam over there
Yeah.
says about that.
Well, something else to think about. I saw pictures in Paris where Christians, people professing Christendom, came out in droves with candles and stuff like that, and they were having vigils as protests, and it was all peaceful.
Yeah.
And
I saw that too. Yeah.
I will put forth to you that if the Paris Olympics had have mocked Islam the way it mocked Christianity, the city would have burned.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
Now, I'm not saying that should be a Christian response,
No.
but the funny thing is, Andrew Tate, who, and I sent this to you, Andrew Tate is a despicable character as far as how he's acted in the past. Supposedly, he no longer does these things. He is a braggadocious, I hate to say it, he's a blowhard, because he does seem to have the ability to back up what he says. But he is braggadocious. He's a bloviator. It's hard to take him seriously. He does say some things, some pearls of wisdom and truth that get through all of the stupidity. But he went out with a picture of this to people in Romania and says, hey, look, all of you, he says, I'm a Muslim. We wouldn't let this happen. Romania is not a Muslim country. Romania is a Christian country. Mm-hmm. And y'all are just standing idly by and let this happen. Why are you doing this? Christians need to stand up and fight. Now, I'm not calling for Christians to stand up and fight the way Andrew Tate was calling Christians to stand up and fight, because the weapons of our warfare are spiritual. How then, if the forces of evil are attacking the forces of good, and our weapons are spiritual, not carnal, well, how do we fight? Romans chapter 13.
Yep.
We have to go through the polis, the civil government, because it's the civil government that wields the sword of vengeance against evildoers.
Not the individual Christian.
Right.
The individual Christian is not to be a avenger. That's the whole turn your cheek. The individual Christian.
Yep.
the way you treat people. But
All those
yeah, go ahead.
all those LGBTQ drag queens and this, that, and the other, we feed them, we protect them if we have to, if it comes to it. We protect them as human beings, not their right to do the sin. We feed them, we help them, but when it comes to their degenerate lifestyle and them trying to force it on to us,
Yeah.
we draw a line in the sand.
Yep.
And we say, not another further.
Yeah.
It is illegal for you to do this. And we're going to use the civil government to stop you because that's what Scripture tells us to do.
Yep. That's some powerful stuff right there. Yep.
Let's read Rita Keeling's comment, and then let's shut things down.
Sounds good.
Well, actually, Chris Olive, Ted Knight, and Rita Keeling. Chris Olive, in a perfect world, it would never be the lesser of two evils. And again, I put forth that we're not voting for the lesser of two evils. We're voting for a person of the world to do a job.
Yeah.
And think about, where's your favorite place to shop and get groceries, Aaron? What do y'all frequent the most?
Just Walmart and Kroger.
Okay, so let's say that every 4 years, Walmart and Kroger held an election for the CEO and the buyers, the C-suite, let's say, and your vote affected the products and the pricing in Kroger and Walmart. You would vote for that, and if you didn't participate in that process, you wouldn't really have a leg to stand on when it come to complaining about your particular places to shop.
Yep.
You would, as Ted put, you would examine the records and act accordingly, and records is what counts.
Yeah.
So if you have a CEO over Kroger, and if you have his cabinet and all that, where it's cheaper and the products are better,
Yep.
and they have the products that you want, then you're going to vote for that guy.
Yep.
Or gal. It doesn't matter. There's nothing.
That's not voting for any sin or
Yes.
unbelief that they hold.
Yes, you would never conceptualize it. Well, I got to vote for who's going to be running the Kroger grocery store chain, and it's the less of two evils. No. You're voting for the person that's going to do the best job in running the grocery store chain.
I know it's not similar, but it is similar. It's not the same, but it's kind of similar. What about an eldership? A godly eldership trying to select what man will be the main guy that stands before the church and teaches and preaches. Now, he must live a faithful life. It's not the exact same, but the guy has sinned before.
Yep.
And yeah, he's forgiven now, but he's going to sin again. Eventually.
Yes, he will.
Does that mean they're voting, quote unquote? They're selecting a man because of whatever sin he used to do or whatever sin he might do or bad slip of judgment?
It's a less of two evils.
Lesser of two evils. Let's see. Is Aaron or Tony going to be our next guy that preaches?
I don't like that framing.
I know. I think it's the way. Don't look at it that way. Is just my way of thinking to suggest. I appreciate you talking about that today, Tony, because I have felt that way before too. And it feels like lesser of two evils kind of thing. But just look at it, what we're trying to do and what we're good at. Not I'm casting a vote to approve for any sin they do.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Now, Rita Keeling. It's like, I love this comment, by the way. I've never heard this, which I'm surprised I've never heard it because I've heard a lot of stuff like this. And I just, anyway, sorry, I tickled me. All right. It's like the shoe salesman that went to a country and saw no one was wearing shoes and didn't think that he would be able to sell shoes. Another salesman came and saw the opportunities there were endless to sell shoes. Ted Knight says, I'm hungry.
Me too. Come on.
Me too. It's about time to get off here. But anyway, I like that. I think sometimes Christians fall prey to the pretty girl syndrome. Well, the pretty girl in school everybody just assumes she has a date for Saturday night, so nobody asks her out.
Yeah.
And I think whenever we look at the world, we assume that the world cannot be changed because it hasn't already changed. Therefore, we don't try to change it.
Right.
I'm not sure, but that may have been Rita's point with the shoe.
Or there's 8 billion people in the world, or there's 8 billion, or there's 8 billion people in the world, and we've gotten rejected by 10 or 20, 100 people at most. That we have invited, quote unquote, invited to church, and they didn't come. And you know what I'm saying? That's oh God, help me not to be so shallow.
There, you and I both know a man that moved from Florida to California. And he got so much grief when he moved to California to preach the gospel that I think he got a little bit snippish whenever folks finally, like he was tired of having the conversation.
Yeah.
And like, why would you berate a gospel preacher to move to a place that really needed the gospel?
Yeah, preach to a place that he believed needed it. I mean, what?
Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can't believe you're moving out there to California, all them liberals and ungodly people. I'm like, where would you have me go?
Yeah, exactly.
People told me that when I came to Canada.
Yep.
One fella even said, well, your truck's going to rust. And I'm like, oh, well, my truck is going to rust because of the salt on the roads. Let me cancel my entire mission.
Right. Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
My truck is going to rust. Go kick rocks, you fool. Ted Hook Knights. Y'all are like Foy Wallace. Foy Wallace must have been long-winded.
Yeah, I've always heard that about him.
All right.
Yep.
Well, guys, listen, we're going to have to shut this down. We talked way more about spiritual warfare than we talked about the Paris Olympics or gaslighting, but
we got a word in on it.
I guarantee it.
And closed
Aaron,
12 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago.
you got anything you want to say before we close?
No, just thanks everybody for your comments and participating. Please help us out by sharing the material and the content that you see online, whether it's the writing or the shows. Put it out there for us. Help us if you like it.
The greatest thing that you can do to help us out is share the content. Introduce our content to somebody that's never been introduced to it.
Yep.
And that's all we've got here, folks. God bless every one of you. This has been Tony Brewer and Aaron Dotson with Christianity Now. Be sure to subscribe on Substack. I don't even have the overlay on. Be sure and subscribe on Substack for free articles. And we release one article a week behind a paywall. And if you'll follow us on YouTube, it really helps us out. We've already been invited to the first stage of the YouTube partnership program. And that means during live streams and stuff that you can super chat and all that good stuff. I haven't figured out how to promote that, but if you like what we say and what we do, you can always do a super chat. But if you want to support us monetarily, please look at the show notes, and there's ways to do that.
Yep.
Other than that, we're going to get off. God bless you. And you can catch these archives on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio under the Cogitations banner. And that's it. God bless you. And we'll